I have a little story to relate to my recent dream conversation with none other than Rose Nader. And the microphone fell off here, but in my dream, Rose Nader appeared and sought my help. She said, "Brian, why are the Democratic candidates for election placing signs on private property without permission of the owners? And why are they passing out junk food to children that are becoming more and more overweight and as a result subject to potential future medical problems? Is it true that one of the Democrats during the Board of Selectmen meeting has suggested to the police chief that the police not obey the state marijuana laws during overtime hours?" In my dream, Rose reminded me that she would not feed hot dogs to her children because she distrusted hot dogs. She did not know what their ingredients were, and that she would never put signs on others' property without obtaining the permission of the owners, and certainly wouldn't disobey the law at any time. After hearing her say that, I wondered what Shafiq would think. Her son Ralph has written that he has not had a hot dog in many, many years. Rose was a very wise woman. Rose bushes have been placed around Winchester to celebrate her 99-year life. I think she died 14 days before her 100th birthday. So it was a pleasure to have that dream. And about this time, I woke up like Rip Van Winston and rubbed my eyes. Last Saturday morning, I was riding down Pratt Street and took a left turn onto a side street to visit a friend. Who did I see in the middle of the street? But a gaggle of Democratic candidates and a street full of moving and parked cars, making it difficult to proceed. So I turned around quickly and exited the street. I thought that they were knocking on doors telling people that the Republicans were in the pockets of the developers and not to vote for them, as they are prone to do. This has been reported to me by victims of people knocking on their door and relaying this information. But alas, they were just putting up signs, some in the wrong places. Selectman Perez was reported in the newspapers as having said that it was probably Mike Renzullo's fault, or something to that effect. What teamwork! If the report is true, that seems just like her. Bob Dylan sang his song, "Only a Pawn in the Game," based on the shooting of Medgar Evers at the beginning of this program. I will be discussing pawns in the game tonight, as they may apply to Winston politics this year. I've changed some of the words to Bob's song just for this program, and I'll save you the excruciating pain of listening to me sing. I'll just recite it. My Winston words: many eyes took aim behind people's frames, but they can't be blamed. They're only pawns in the game. And they're taught to accuse in a pack, criticize leaders often behind their back, with a fistful of ink to pillory and sink, to hide neath the print, to insult with much pain, like puppets on strings. They may, or most likely will not, use their names. But they aren't to blame They're only pawns in the game. But when the shadowy sun sets on those that pun, who encourage the suits, they'll see by their graves, on stones that remain, carved next to their name, their epitaphs plain, they were only pawns in the game. We'll have a lot more on that tonight during the program. We'll go to the agenda now. Comments I just gave. Time remaining until the November election. A definition of what an environmentalist is, because we are being overtaken by environmentalists in this day and age in this town. You should know what the word means. Again, I will put up the now defunct Winchester Party candidate losers in the last election. I'll talk a bit about last week. I'll summarize the program from last week for those who might have missed it, because it's very important to understand this before you vote. I'm going to tell you what I think the Indicrat game is. And as you know from last week, the Indicrats are the independents that joined with the Democrats to be a de facto majority in the last administration, and then lost all of the independent, former independent party seats in the election from the Winchester Party. I'm going to talk about pawns in the game. And I'm going to mention what I think, Brian's opinion, of the basic Winsted political party images, the image of each party in the town. Remember, I told you that in my sociology class, everybody stated what they thought Brian's problems were, and they all had different opinions, and in the end, they were totally different than what I thought my problems were. So tonight we're going to do that exercise with the three political parties, giving you Brian's viewpoint. They see themselves probably differently than I do. And if there's time, I will show again clip number 1 from the recent selectmen meeting, and just in case there isn't time, the book is now in the library, Beardsley M. Memorial Library. I have it out for today, but I'll bring it back tonight. And if you want to read the book, written The Lost Child, then you can get it out of that library starting tomorrow morning. And then if there's time, I'll just talk a bit about Michael Jordan and a bit about Thomas Wolfe, who wrote, "You Can't Go Home Again." Election day, November 3rd, 2009. Days to election, 48. Weeks to election, 7. Months to election, 1.5. Final weekly program, Planning for Success, Wednesday, October 28th, 2009. I want to remind you tonight, first thing, that selectman, Democratic selectman Althea Perez, has missed 13 selectman meetings during this administration. Republican selectman and mayor Kenneth J. Fracasso has missed 1 meeting during this administration. Remember that when you vote. We don't want somebody who doesn't attend meetings. And we'll talk about more about that next week. Environmentalist is a definition. I got it out of the dictionary down at the college library. An environmentalist is an expert on environmental problems. Or an environmentalist is any person who works to protect the air, water, animals, and plants, and other natural resources from pollution or its effects. Or an environmentalist is a person who believes that differences between individuals or groups, especially in moral and intellectual attributes, are predominantly determined by experience opposed to hereditarian. Now, our environmentalists in this area fall in the second definition, in my opinion. Few of them are experts, I can tell you that. I know that for sure. They're any person who works to protect the air, water, animals, plants, and other natural resources from pollution or its effects. It's a very important definition because we're going to be talking a lot about environmentalists over the next month or so. I put this up last week. The now defunct Winchester Party losers in the last election. These were not all members of the party, but most of them were. Some of them were just people in other parties who ran on the Winchester Party ticket. Board of Selectmen: Barbara Wilkes, Arthur W. Melcher, Susan O. Clausen, John Bentley Wynn. They ran for the Board of Selectmen, and they all lost in the election. The Board of Education: Michael D. Fox, Carol O'Connell, Lisa Smith, controversial, very controversial, Lisa Smith, and the town clerk, Glenn E. Wynn, ran for that seat. They all lost. Some of them got very few votes. And the constables: Harold P. Wilkes, Sean T. Melcher, the son of Arthur Melcher. They lost as well. Now, last week we talked about some things that I want to kind of summarize tonight to just re-emphasize, and for people who didn't see it to hear it for the first time. There are a small percentage of Highland Lake Watershed Association leaders and their followers, mostly on the east side of the Highland Lake District, from various political parties with plenty of time on their hands, because they are mostly educators, currently or retired, and retirees from everywhere of all sorts living at the lake. They have plenty of time on their hands. Most of them that get involved in the town fall under the definition that I gave you of the environmentalists. Some are extreme environmentalists, and they're way over on the left side of the normal distribution curve. Most people are in the middle of the curve, and then people that want to throw acid in the lake, etc., they're on the right-hand side of the curve. I don't know any of them, but they appear to be frustrated by the pace of the progress, and they perceive an inability to resolve their water quality and residential tax problems rapidly enough for their liking. They have been further galvanized by the applications and discussions concerning the two major age-restricted housing developments on 600 acres of land in their backyard. There is an expression in Winsted I learned when I came here: you can build anywhere you want, but not in my backyard. Many of their leaders joined in a newly formed independent party composed of unaffiliated members and former members of the two major parties, Republican and Democrats. Together, as independents, they ran for office in the next election on a low-tax increase platform and won many seats on the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education, as well as some of the constable seats. The three victorious independent selectmen appeared to have rapidly formed an alliance with the two victorious Democratic selectmen and the Indocrats. So this coalition of the three independent selectmen that were voted in and the two Democrat ones got labeled Indicrats during their term of office by people who were interested in their activities. They enjoyed a de facto majority on the Board of Selectmen over the Republican two selectmen, rendering them very ineffective. Now, in the last few weeks, I've been looking at videos of those meetings, of the last selectmen meetings of the last administration, and one of the things I did notice was that The Republicans were very, very gentlemanly, and most of them, I didn't see anywhere they got out of control. And they were very professional, and they were very civil, as were mostly the Democrats. This de facto majority was against the major development and as a result, the members that did believe, well, I got it, of development projects, I got that out of order, development projects, and in favor of a gigantic bond package, about 57 million or so, including about 13 million dollars in interest, all this to be paid back over a 20-year period. Would have been very expensive for the taxpayers of both Winsted and the state of Connecticut. The leaders of the Independent Party Town Committee did not agree with either of these objectives, and as a result, the members that did believe resigned from the party. And just to make it clear, the leaders of the Independent Party were in favor of the developments and against the bond issue. The Indecrat members of their party were against the development, or appeared to be against the development, and fought against the developer and the development, but their Independent Party was in favor of these developments, providing they didn't have an inordinate amount of children in them, and most of them were age restricted, so that wouldn't be too much of a problem. While in office, the de facto majority began to place fellow environmentalists from the lake and other areas of town on important town committees and commissions. Until the developments came along, not too many people were interested in getting on these commissions. But when the development came along, that last administration saw the opportunity to put a lot of their environmentalists on these committees and commissions. Some of them were extreme environmentalists. Some of those that withdrew eventually from the Independent Party formed a new party called the Winchester Party, along with supporters from the lake and elsewhere, to run candidates for office in the November 2005 election. The new party and their supporters lost every seat. And the Republicans, who campaigned in favor of the projects and their future profitable and revenue, and against the gigantic tax-heavy 20-year bond package and its associated large tax increase, they won the election. They won 5 seats on the existing administration. As a result, the Republicans won a majority of the selectmen seats, together with 2 very disillusioned and unhappy Democrats, also uncooperating Democrats. After recovering from the sting of losing all of their desired seats, the Winchester Party was abandoned, and their supporters from all affiliations began to rail viciously against the victors and formed a mean-spirited political pressure group in quest for victory in the November 2009 election. They held progress meetings, attended town commission and committee meetings, taping some so we could all see them. I think that was a good thing they did, tape the meetings and put them on television so we could all see what was happening. And they harassed the developer and his team of experts and members of various commissions and the press, and they hosted a weekly TV program to promote their extreme views, vent the anger of their supporters and themselves and their allies, in the Democratic Party, and probably half the Democratic Party agrees with the Democrats, and probably half of it doesn't. They are split. I don't know the exact proportions, but there is a big difference on these issues in the Democratic Party. And possibly during this program, I never watch it, so I don't know for sure, but I'm told that maybe illusions were spun. Now, I want to show you where I get my information. I get information from a lot of people and a lot of things, but for tonight's program, you can do the same thing I did. You can go to www.torringtonregister.com. You can click on the Register Citizen Serving Litchfield County, Connecticut heading. You can enter a name or a subject of any kind. You can put your own name in, you can put my name in, you can put anybody's name in. You can put in the Democratic Party name, you can put in the Republican Party name, the Independent Party name, the Green Party, Ralph Nader, anything you want, you can put in there, and when you do that, you enter a name in the search box, you click on the search, the information associated with that name will appear on the screen, and you can see all the articles that have been written over the last few years, all the letters to the editor that concern the subject you put in, and you can also see a lot of what I would call skanky information that people who don't sign your name write about these articles and these letters to the editor. And you can get a feel for the kind of information that's flowing from our town and maybe a little from Torrington to these blogs at the Torrington Register. You can see it for yourself. They're online. If you don't have a computer, go to one of the libraries, and if you can't do that, have a friend print them out for you, and if worse comes to worse, get a hold of me and I'll run the name through and print it out for you and give it to you. But that's where you can see, your eyes will see the same things that I see, in addition, of course, to commission meetings, committee meetings, other meetings in town, and talking to people and getting feedback from people everywhere. So now I want to explain to you what the game is that I'm talking about tonight, that peoples are pawns in. It's the loser's game. The game of the Indocrats, both members of the some members of the Democratic Party and the ex-members of the Winchester Party, and a few Republicans, disgruntled Republicans, and some disgruntled independent people and unaffiliated people. The game is to help the Democrats to win the majority in the next election, and in my view, at any cost. I think that they are publicly trying to berate and embarrass the Republicans as often as they can, as often as possible, at any cost. I think that they're trying to publicly berate the major development projects at any cost, and you can see this when you look into the Register last couple of years of letters, articles, and comments. I think that they're trying to publicly berate individual developers of the major projects at any cost. I think that they're trying to publicly berate and embarrass the town manager at any cost. I see this on over and over and over and over again at the selectmen meetings where the Democrats, minority, are trying to berate the town manager and the 5 Republican selectmen. Once in a while, you'll see the Republicans trying to berate the Democrats too, but they stopped doing that after a few months in office because they weren't getting anywhere with it. The Democratic berating just kept going on till this day. I think they're trying to stop the major projects from coming to fruition at any cost. And in a few weeks, I'm going to be telling you about how positive the major projects are moving along, albeit slowly, partly caused by the recession. Someday the recession will be over. The economy will be squared away. Bernanke just said today or yesterday that the recession's probably over. And remember, I always tell you that Bernanke would then work on trying to keep inflation down. Inflation seems to be under control now. He has to keep working on that. Sooner or later, interest rates will rise. But this thing's going to end someday. I think they are working, and I've heard rumors that they were working to try to resuscitate and justify, after they're into office, if they get in, the majority, the gigantic bond package at any cost. I think, from what I see in the papers, especially, and what I see in commission and committee meetings, I think they're trying to use any and all possible tactics to achieve their ends. They can be loud, jumping up and down with signs and things like that. They can interrupt and all. They can be mean. They can be derisive. They can be very argumentative, which is not bad as long as you do it in a civil way. They'd use 60s tactics. Don't forget, I was around in the 60s. Matter of fact, I was pretty active in the 60s with some pretty famous people in the civil rights battle. And I know all the tactics. The only one we haven't seen so far is somebody being sit in and being dragged out by the police. But I did hear somebody mention that perhaps that was a possibility at one time. They can be disrespectful, interrupt meetings, as I said, and often be out of order. They can take advantage, I believe, they can take advantage of people and issues, personally and organizationally, affected by the difficult decisions that the Republican majority and the town manager must make in an effort to produce results for the taxpayers and the fellow citizens. And this is where they begin to take advantage of people who've been affected by the decisions of the Republican Party and the town manager. They begin to try to make them pawns in their game. I think that they actively recruit and support and encourage pawns from the pool of people that may be angry with the Republicans or town manager for one decision or another that they have to make to conduct business in this town and try to keep us under very difficult circumstances in at least reasonable financial condition. And they didn't inherit the best balance of finances in the world when they were elected. And the people that were in before them, guess who? The Indocrats. Okay, now I want to say what I think the basic Winsted political party images are. These don't come from the parties. They're not their platforms. They're not statements of what they want to do. They're Brian's impression. Just like in a sociology class. I'm giving you my impression. All you people out there in the audience, you can give your impressions. You might see it totally different than I do. But I want to let you know the way I think, because in a few weeks I will be making suggestions to you about who I think I'm going to vote for and who I'm not going to vote for in the next election. I want you to know the criteria that I'm using. This is part of it. These are party, town committee beliefs, in my opinion, and may not be the beliefs of any given member or even the organizations themselves. It's up to you. When you see their programs on TV, and there are 4 that lean towards the Democrats and 1 that leans towards the Republicans and the Republican Party themselves, and then there's 2 or 3 that lean towards the Independent Party, call in there and ask any question you want, especially if you see something on here you want to question more, just call them up and ask them. Now, who do I think are the pawns in this game? Who are the Indocrats using to try to embarrass the Republicans and the town manager and gain office the majority in office in the next election. Well, I think they're using the Democratic Party itself. You have to understand that sometimes when you have two entities, one entity is trying to use the other as a pawn, and the other entity is trying to use the first entity as a pawn. So they're both using each other as pawns, and there could be a third or a fourth person involved, and in this case there are many people involved. The town manager, all the bad news you hear about the town manager, he's just a pawn in the game. And if you want to see him at his best, call up Channel 13 or call up Bill Pratt and get a copy of his last appearance on the EDC program a few weeks ago, and you'll be very, very impressed with this town manager. I'll probably play some of it on this program in the next few weeks. The POCD is a pawn in the game. The water and sewer lines down the northeast corridor are a pawn in the game. If we can slow these down, then perhaps, my view, if we can slow those down, then it's tougher for the development, and maybe something will happen like a major recession while these are being resolved. Disgruntled individuals removed from or not reappointed to boards and commissions. We've seen some of that recently. They're pawns in the game. They'll write letters to the papers. You can see that when you go onto the Torrington Register and look. Usually if people are mature, if they serve 10 years or even 3 or 4 years or 5 on a board or commission, and somebody said, look, we'd rather put somebody new in there, somebody different, then usually you take it like an adult. And this doesn't seem to be happening because I think people are becoming pawns in this game. Some of them may already been in the game. The Civil Service Commission is a pawn in the game. All this stuff you hear about the Civil Service Commission. It's election time, and it's all to make, in my view, to make the town manager and the Republican selectmen, not the Democrats, the Indocrats, but the Republicans and the town manager look bad around election time. The 207, 208 audit is a pawn in the game. I had a whole program about that. We know that every administration for the last 10 years has been involved in that. And as far as I can see, this administration has done more good about it. Watch the selectmen meetings and you'll see the reports than all the administrations before put together. The media can be a pawn in the game. They provide the letters to the editor space and the blog called Sound Off that allows people to write without even signing their name and say anything they want within reason. They have some restrictions on what you can say. I don't even know what they all are. And also, people can go in and remove things that other people said under certain conditions. So that's that. Environmentalists, kind of a pawn in the game. If we can use the environmentalists to help us stop bringing in this development, these major developments that need, that we need for additional recurring profitable revenue to help balance our books every year and get the things we need. And if we can use the environmentalists to help us slow that down, we will, is my opinion, with this group. Now, I want to point out that the environmentalists, the ones in the middle of the distribution curve, they do a lot of good. There's a lot of people that were involved in these sessions that point out a lot of things that need to be done and improved. But they do it in a positive way. They do it in a positive way. The Highland Lake Watershed Association, in my opinion, is often used as a pawn in the game. The big bond drafters, people who drafted the big bond issue, are used perhaps as pawns in the game. You decide for yourself when you read the letters. The DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, can be used to slow things down and be a pawn in the game. The Army Corps of Engineers may be a pawn in the game if we can use them to slow things down, as they did when they used they slowed the Yale golf course down so much that when they finally got to the point where the guy just about had approval, he couldn't afford it anymore. And environmentalists kind of work that way, and they'd always have their facts when they say things. I got a lot of examples of that right here from our own hometown. The major developer himself is a pawn in the game. But if they can find anything, any dirt at all on the developer, they will find it and get it out in the open. And then he has to defend himself on that. Maybe true, maybe false. The sound off column in the Torrington Register is a pawn in the game. People can use it without even signing their name to bash these people. Now, I want to talk a bit about what I call my image of these parties. The Democrats, my view, the bad half of the Democratic Party, the indocrat half, is not trustworthy. They have hidden agendas. They tend to say one thing and mean another, making it difficult for us to understand them and for them to be measured. They are against the major developments in the backyard of the east side of the Highland Lake, of which most of these Indocrats are leaders of the Indocrats, whether they be Democrats or the ex-members of the Independent Party, live. It's in their backyard. Now, I'd like to say that they're entitled to put in input and to try to defend their own position. But that's different than trying to knock the Republicans and town manager off their seats. They're not taxpayer conscious. They wanted the big bond issue with disregard, total disregard for the taxpayers. Taxpayers voted it down overwhelmingly. They were in favor of that big bond issue. They wanted to borrow the money now and pay later. And you saw what happened to America when people borrow too much money now and we're going to pay later. They're losing their houses now and many other things as a result. We're not, because we didn't do the big bond issue, but we're still in financial difficulty. They're in favor of selling town-owned land, but not at the lake, not at Highland Lake, not in my backyard. I might want to have a garage on my property, but I don't want other people to buy a little piece of property next to them and put a garage on their property. They're in favor of more town government. They always want big committees, want more people involved on these commissions and committees. If we have a committee like the rec board, which the charter says you can have 9 to 13, they'll want 13. The Republicans will probably want 9 because they believe in smaller committees. They're in favor of bureaucratic management and spending techniques. They love bureaucracy. Watch those two Democrats on the selectmen meetings every week. You see plenty of examples of that. They are wed to supporters that are too tied to a minority of environmental extremists in the Highland Lake District and elsewhere. That's my opinion, and I've been looking at it now for almost 10 years. And they are in favor of giving schools. I've heard Selectman Ronzullo say many times, let's give them what they want. Let's give them everything they asked for. Well, we can't do that. There's 65% of our budget, and they want to financially borrow, if necessary, and pay interest rates to do things that we shouldn't be doing that for. Of course, we have to borrow some money. We have to have some bond issues, but they don't have to be gigantic, and they don't have to be at this particular time in the economy. Now, how about the Republicans? My view, and don't forget, I'm an unaffiliated person here, so I'm not speaking as a Republican, Democrat, or Independent Party person. I'm speaking as an unaffiliated person. There are about 3,800 voters in this town, compared to about 1,900 Democrats and 1,400 or so, or 500 Republicans in that neighborhood, give or take 50 in each of the areas, and 50 that are in smaller parties. The Republicans are trustworthy. They mean and try to do what they say, and they have no hidden agendas that I know of. They actively support the major developments if responsible and professionally planned and developed. They don't want to see anything in here that isn't done right. Don't believe anybody if they try to tell you that opposite. They are taxpayer conscious. Now, sometimes it doesn't appear that way, but in general, they are here very taxpayer conscious, as you saw this year, where you got 2-0 increases because of the recession, and you got a big savings because the bond package did not get approved. They're against the big bond issue, still are. Earn before you spend is their motto. Earn the money, then spend it. Now, there are exceptions, like the Pearson OCR complaints and things like that, that have to be done, and other things in the other schools and in the town. They are in favor of gradual and affordable spending, and they've demonstrated that this year and the last year. They are in favor of keeping long-term debt to a minimum. They are in favor of selling town-owned land, including land at Highland Lake. You can argue forever with people at Highland Lake, the environmentalists. They're not professional environmentalists, most of them. They're amateur environmentalists, concerned about the environment. That's good. Sometimes they think they act like professional ones, but not really. And they think that if you sell the land, they automatically think in the Democratic Party that people will misuse it. The Republicans think that if you sell the land, people will use it properly and to their advantage and to the town's advantage. They're in favor of less town government. Let's keep the government small, and let's keep it effective, and let's keep it affordable. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me in the last 5 years and said that we have to watch this very carefully now until we get some more recurring, profitable, additional revenue into town from either some new factories, businesses, or the large age-restricted developments. They're in favor of less bureaucratic management and spending techniques. They want to let the town manager get on with his job and do it properly. They want to stick with the policy. The Democrats have a tendency to want to micromanage the town manager, get involved with the day-to-day running of the town, and they're not content, in my opinion, to stick with the policy. They're not wed to minority environmental extremists in the Highland Lake District, but are conscious of their needs. And remember, the environmental extremists are only a very small portion of environmentalists. Most of them are responsible and positive. But you know how it is. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, and the people that make the most noise, although they may be a small fraction of the environmentalists, do cause a lot of delay in the things that we need to do. And I am an environmentalist, in the middle of the normal distribution curve, like most people. Not saying I don't make a mistake once in a while, not saying other people don't, but that's life. We're human. They're in favor of giving schools whatever they truly need financially, as we can afford to invest. And I'll talk about that more in future weeks when I talk about the Board of Education. They come forward every year and say, here's what we want to do our job. And then they get their budget cut. And then they say, they get their forecast and their needs cut. And then they say, well, we didn't get the budget we wanted, so we can't do our job. And that's not good. We get cut in every business. We always go in, we ask for money, and we always get cut back, and then we go on and do the job, manage within our budget. The Independent Party, they're dedicated. They put in the time and do their homework. There's no doubt about that. They're always down checking freedom of information, checking minutes of meetings, and they're really diligent about that. They're trustworthy. They say what they mean and try to do what they say. Not saying they're always right, not saying they always do it in the right way, but that's their intent. They're working toward a resolution to school problem of costs and test scores. They're very diligent about that, very industrious, very professional in many ways. Sometimes people don't like the way they go about it, but you know, we're all human. Nobody's perfect. They believe in the major developments, if done professionally and responsibly, with an affordable amount of students in residence. They believe in cost controls. They're against the big bond issue as a party. There are some individuals in the Independent Party that are in favor of it, or parts of it. But in general, they're against the big bond issue and have been. In the meetings they attend, I've always noticed that they have professional conduct in the meetings. Some meetings they might not want to attend because they think that there's a problem with the legal aspects of it, but when they go, they're usually very professional and for the time they spend in the meetings. I also see them at the town meetings. They're pretty professional there as well. They say their piece and go home. They try their best to abide by the law at all times. With that, I am now going to play the cannabis marijuana clip from the recent selectmen meeting where the Democratic selectman, Mike Renzullo, talks about marijuana with the police chief and the selectmen. The book that I promised is now in the Beardsley and Memorial Library, available for your use. It is called The Lost Child, A Mother's Story by Julie Myerson. Ask for it. After this clip, we'll end the program by playing, once again, Pawn in the Game.
You mentioned a couple times when you were going through drug investigations.
Yeah.
What kind of drug investigations exactly? I mean, are we talking about heroin or are we talking about marijuana?
No, we're talking about heroin and crack.
Okay.
Which both are a problem for us.
Right, because I would just say right off, I mean, our state legislature overwhelmingly, I think there was maybe 13 legislators that voted not to decriminalize marijuana. Massachusetts decriminalized marijuana. I think that the only reason it's not currently decriminalized is because our governor vetoed it. And personally, I lived in Colorado for 10 years. The citation out there is like, I think it's like a $50 ticket. I just hope we're not wasting any money on that.
No, the last drug operation that we had, and I can put together the cases that we had, I think we made 10 arrests out of it. We're all for heroin and crack.
Right.
And,
which is, you know, obviously you would...
those investigations on a shoestring. I went to Keith, explained to him we didn't have the money for overtime. My officers agreed to do it for compensatory time. We went out and put investigations together. We shut down some places that were right near the church that were dealing crack. There's people there that are still facing jail time. There was another place down on Park Place, a crack house that we shut down. There was a person that was selling Vicodin. He was getting prescriptions from the Stockton Whatever and then selling the Vicodin up at Highland Way, and he was arrested. So we were productive with the limited amount that we had, and I need to continue to do that because you know you can't back off and stop your enforcement efforts. But we don't have the overtime money to do it, and I can't keep asking my officers to do it for compensatory time because eventually we pay overtime for that. So what I need is some assistance, and the federal government's going to give us that in the way of about $10,000 in cash.
No, I was just curious because obviously there's a distinction between, you know...
It's not marijuana.
Like that, you know, right. Which
Our problems run a lot deeper than that.
Dave? So I guess this is a little off the subject here, but I guess I just want to be clear. You're suggesting that the PD not bother to enforce the existing marijuana laws in the state of Connecticut because you believe it should be legalized?
I think that just we're talking about overtime, and that as it was listed down here as far as investigations, contractual agreements, that was one of the things that he had listed. He cited not continuing the DARE program You know, I think there's obviously a distinction between things like heroin and cocaine and marijuana. That's what I'm saying.
So you're saying he shouldn't spend much time worrying about marijuana?
I certainly wouldn't want a costly investigation to go and be wasting taxpayer dollars on that, no.
Wasting taxpayer dollars on drug violations. Okay, I just wanted to be clear.